Hi, my name is John Cordy, and what's this channel always been about? I'd argue that it's always been about telling the truth, whether that's comfortable or uncomfortable. And something I noticed recently on a couple of gigs was that if I had to design the perfect conduit for spreading a disease, it would obviously look exactly like a saxophone. Now, you imagine you're blowing your disease through and it gets dispersed through the bell, right, a shower of viral load all over your audience's chest and face. And so I've decided that I need to talk more on this channel about sax offenders, and we're going to publish a list of sax offenders registered in your local area, and we're going to put these people on the sax offenders register, and we're going to hold them to account and say, stuff your sax. Yeah, we don't want to be receiving your viral load from your dirty jazz instrument. Alright? Sax offenders register. Right, okay, in this video I wanted to look at the Soldano SLO model in the Helix, in the HX Stomp, and the manual, you'll be disappointed to find out if you've been watching any of these recent videos, is one of the file under useless manuals. It doesn't really have any particular information which is useful in it. However, we have a cab which is specific to Soldano, this one here, so it's using eminent speakers. You could experiment with other speakers as well, but I'm just going to keep it proprietary for the sake of this video. So I'm going to use, I don't know, maybe a ribbon mic. Let's have a few reflections, 10, and a 57, sort of a classic setup. I'm going to put a smidge of reverb here. Let's see, we're going to use glitz because that one's nice and usable, forgiving. And so when it comes to the actual amp, we've got a few different options. So I guess we'll start with the clean and we'll move quickly on to the others. So we've got solo, clean, crunch and OD. So the actual amp itself is a 2-channel amp. You can switch between clean, crunch and then the OD channel. You have like a switch where you switch between clean and crunch, but you can foot switch between these 2 independent channels. Let's just listen to what the clean stock settings are. So, is it all the way clean? Let's just have a look. Fairly kind of immediate attack. And seems to stay clean most of the way there. Now on the real amp you have a bright switch. We don't have one here for whatever reason, but you could do something like this to mimic the impact of bright switch. So in this case I'm going to put a boost at around 2 kilohertz. So 2 kilohertz here. If we boost this by an amount, so maybe 5. Get a bit more brightness. You could put this before the amp as well. if you're looking for a bit more brightness there, that's something you could maybe try. Anyway, so dimed the drive. We're still basically in clean territory. So bass. Not doing a whole lot, so you can keep that fairly high without too many problems. Let's try. The mid control. Seems quite balanced there in the middle in the default setting. And again, like treble wide, that seems okay to me. If we take it down a bit, we get a bit of a darker tone, obviously. But if you're going to be using your volume control to back things off a bit, you may want to run that treble a little bit higher, like 7. And then we've got channel volume here where we can add even more volume. Plenty of headroom on this particular amp, and a master. If we wanted to run it a bit hotter and get a little bit more juice out of that clean tone, we could do, or run it even lower to get more clean headroom, and then we could use that channel volume to. But as you see, that's the drive up 10. A very usable clean tone, I'd suggest. So I'll just save this a second. So let's just switch channels now then quickly. So the crunch channel, I'm imagining is going to be where we left off with the other channel. So let's just turn up our master a bit. So sort of picking up where we left off. Can do kind of clean, and then as we get this gain up to halfway, we're starting to get into more of that martially, crunchy territory. And then drive all the way up. Kind of a purring, driven tone, crunchy. We could try that same trick if we want a bit more of that brightness. Might be a bit aggressive. But yeah, that EQ to mimic that bright switch might be something that you might want to check out. But yeah, that's the crunch channel. Sounds pretty good where it is for me. If you're thinking about turning this into a lead tone, I'd maybe boost the mids a bit. might also be a good candidate for a channel that you could boost. Maybe you boost this with something, I don't know, like maybe something like a rap. Probably going to want some gate with this because we're talking about quite an extreme amount of gain with the Soldano. So I think probably if you're wanting a Soldano, you're going to be wanting some of that high-end sizzle, but we're talking probably something like a hot-rodded Marshall kind of thing. Looking at this particular model, but we'll save that. That could work really nicely for some kind of hair metal-y type stuff. You can add presence if you really want more sizzle. But I kind of like the stock settings there. But it kind of sounds pretty decent, I think, wherever you set those settings. So even with like a mid scoop there. I guess one thing I'd say about this amp is it sustains and feels really nice to play. The very last channel, and I guess is probably the one that you're more looking forward to, is the Solo Lead OD channel. And this is one that I think works really, really well. You can hit it with a compressor. This is what I was trying earlier in the start of the video. And just out of the box, it just sustains really nicely. Sounds pretty good, I think. So, starting off where the crunch left, we got crazy amounts of gain on this one. And you could think about this sort of like a dual rectifier. It is a dual rectifier circuit, I think. The lower you've got the drive, the kind of tighter the response. And you'll be wanting to look for that sweet spot, because as you get kind of up to 8, 9 and 10, the bass end of things kind of starts to overtake. And then as you bring it back down, it kind of opens back out again. So maybe with higher gain sounds, you might want to run the bass a little bit lower. Or you riff risk things getting quite kind of active in the bass end. So there. But you can keep that bass and drive really high. For a lead tone, it works really nicely. Personally, I think I would boost the mids for my lead tone and probably add a delay, obviously. And I think personally I would introduce a high cut for this kind of thing on my lead tones, just because there's quite a lot of that fizzier stuff going on here because we're using an incredibly high gain tone. So and then you can bring the treble up even more if you want to, because you've just Now, we talked about the bright switch, which isn't there. There's also a depth control on more recent models of the Soldano stuff. So a depth switch typically is doing sort of like the opposite of a presence, or the opposite end of the spectrum. So you could think about maybe boosting things in this kind of region, the 150 Hertz area, kind of the hefty end of the spectrum. I'll just show you what's going on with but you probably won't need this so much. So those are kind of my thoughts on the Soldano models. The Solo Lead OD particularly, I think, stands out as being one of those ideal candidates for creating a great lead tone with the Helix. It's not one that I use all the time, but each time I put that on, I think, okay, that's doing things quite efficiently. You know, you don't really need to boost it with anything to get crazy amounts of gain, and it's quite flexible in terms of shaping it. Consider changing out for kind of Celestion V30 type speakers. I think that's quite common in the more metal orientated world, or, you know, heavy rock stuff. I think that's definitely more common in the kind of more metal and rock orientated world, but here's just dropping it into my normal kind of Eric lead preset. Just drop that in place of the litigator here with the stock settings. But it feels really good to play, and as I say, you can get crazy amounts of gain. And so hopefully that was vaguely useful for anyone who is looking at the Soldano models. As I say, there's not a depth switch, which is on more recent Soldano amplifiers. I don't think there was back when Soldano was kind of in its heyday. There isn't a bright switch either, but you could try and mimic that with the use of EQ or something like that if you find you need it. As it is, I find the amp is kind of bright anyway, so you probably will get away without using it if you use that presence control and treble control. Hopefully that's vaguely interesting to one or two people. I'll drop these presets into the folder for you. There'll be kind of 3, and maybe I'll put together a bigger Helix one as well if someone leaves me a comment saying, can you do that? But hopefully that was vaguely interesting to one or two people. Apologies that there's not more content in the manual for us to look at, so we kind of have to freeball this one. Hopefully that was helpful. Catch you in another video soon. Cheers.